Today's story is so heartbreaking, it may leave you angry. Unfolding in the silent, unforgiving frontier of the Old West, where dirt streets remembered every cruelty ever committed. This was a place where men ruled by fear, and a woman's worth was decided before she ever spoke a word. It started with 3 whispered words. It's a girl. A small truth that triggered a chain of events no one could undo. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The early sun stretched long, crooked shadows across the dirt-packed main street of Copper Creek. But Clara Whitfield hardly saw them. She sat on the worn wooden steps of the house that had been hers only hours earlier, her back bent, her strength spent. Her arms cradled a small bundle close to her chest. The infant girl, barely 3 days old, slept in fragile peace, untouched by the verdict already passed on her life. "You got till noon to be gone," snarled Orrin Blackwell, her late husband's brother, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. If you'd given Samuel Whitfield a son, maybe things would be different. A girl ain't worth the milk she drinks. Clara's body still throbbed from the brutal labor. Her dress, once clean and pale, was marked with blood and sweat, and her face held the drained color of old paper. But worse than the pain was the way people looked at her. Eyes stripped of warmth, neighbors turned strangers overnight. Edith Crowley, the banker's wife, lifted her skirts as she passed, as though misfortune were something that could crawl up her hem. "Samuel must be rolling in his grave," she muttered loud enough for Clara to hear. All that work on the claim, and for what? A useless girl. The words stung like hornets, sharp and relentless. Clara said nothing. In the 2 days since Eloan's birth, she had learned that speaking only sharpened their cruelty. The men who ruled Copper Creek had sealed her fate the moment the midwife announced the truth. It's a girl. Samuel had been gone 6 months now, killed in a mine collapse that took 3 others with him. Clara had survived on scraps of goodwill and the promise whispered behind her back that she carried a son who would someday swing a pick and keep the Whitfield name alive. They had imagined a boy, broad-shouldered, strong, useful. Instead, Clara had disappointed them all. She had failed Samuel, failed the town. In Copper Creek, a daughter was a liability. Another mouth in a place where survival meant broken backs and raw hands. The mine owners needed laborers, not girls who would grow up needing protection. "Please," Clara said at last, her voice hoarse and thin. "Just give me a few days. I can barely stand, and the baby should have been born dead if it was going to be a girl." A cold voice cut in. Wade Hargreaves stepped out of the mining office shadows, the most powerful man in Copper Creek. He owned the largest share of the mine and half the buildings on Main Street. His presence alone made others shift back, like cattle sensing the lash. Hargreaves was a man who had climbed from nothing and learned cruelty like a craft, his pale eyes fixed on Clara, sharp and measuring. "Your husband owed me money," he said casually, though Clara knew it was a lie. Samuel had kept careful records. "With him gone," Wade continued, "and you birthing nothing but useless girl flesh, I'm calling in the debt. The house, the mine shares, all of it. You're lucky I'm giving you till noon." Clara pushed herself upright, swaying as the world tilted. Eloan stirred but did not wake. "Samuel's shares belong to me. It's in his will." "What will?" Wade smiled, slow and predatory. "Ain't seen one." He glanced at the men behind him. "Any of you boys seen a will?" Heads shook. Some men looked away. Others met Clara's eyes with practiced indifference. Men who had drunk with Samuel, stood at their wedding, sworn they'd look after her. Promises meant nothing against Wade Hargreaves. "You can't do this," Clara whispered, clutching Elowen tighter. "Where will we go?" "Not my problem," Wade said. "Maybe Deadwood. Saloons always need women, long as you leave the brat somewhere." A sharp gasp rippled through the women nearby. Still, no one spoke. No one dared. Clara scanned the faces she had known for 3 years. She had stitched quilts with their wives, shared meals, held their fevered children through the night. Now she was something worse than barren. She was cursed. "My daughter isn't a burden," Clara said, anger lending her strength. "She's a child of God, same as any boy." "Blasphemy," Oren spat. "God made women to serve men and bear sons. You failed at the only thing that matters." Murmurs followed. Clara saw Martha Henley, whose baby she had helped deliver just last spring, turn her face away. Even the pastor's wife kept her distance. "You got till noon," Wade repeated. "After that, I'll have the boys walk you out. And they ain't always gentle." He turned back toward his office, boots striking the boardwalk like a ticking clock. The crowd thinned, voices already drifting back to ore prices and winter yields, as if a woman and her child hadn't just been sentenced to die. Clara sank onto the steps again, her strength finally gone. She lowered her head, rocking Elowen close, while Copper Creek moved on without her. Her strength finally gave way. Elowen began to stir, whimpering with hunger, and Clara Whitfield's hands shook as she drew her shawl tighter for modesty and guided the baby to nurse. At least she could still give her this, though the milk was thin, weakened by days of little food. "Clara?" The gentle voice made her lift her head. Mei Lin, the Chinese laundry woman, stood a few steps away, careful not to come too close, a small bundle clutched in her hands. "I brought some food and clean cloths for the baby." Tears welled in Clara's eyes at the kindness. Mei Lin herself barely belonged in Copper Creek, tolerated only because she worked cheaper than anyone else dared. "Thank you," Clara whispered. Mei Lin set the bundle beside her and spoke in a low voice. "There's an old wagon trail heading east. It eventually reaches Fort Laramie, maybe 3 days on foot, if." She glanced at Clara's ashen face and stopped short. 3 days walking. Clara could hardly manage 3 steps without the world spinning, and winter was closing in fast. "I'll manage," Clara said, because there was nothing else to say. Mei Lin nodded once and hurried off before anyone noticed her compassion. Clara understood. In Copper Creek, kindness carried a cost few could afford. The sun climbed higher. The shadow of the gallows tree shrank against the dirt. That tree had claimed men for horse theft, for killing over cards, for having the wrong skin in the wrong place. Clara wondered if one day birthing daughters might be added to the list. She forced herself to stand and step back inside the house to gather what little remained. Samuel Whitfield's rifle was gone. Orrin Blackwell had taken it the day after the funeral, claiming it was for safekeeping. The money tin sat empty. She suspected Wade Hargreaves' men had helped themselves while she labored through childbirth. All that remained were a few clothes, a Bible, the wedding quilt her mother had stitched, and Samuel's watch. She wrapped them together, tore a petticoat to fashion a sling for Elowen, and prepared to face the open land with nothing but resolve and a 3-day-old child. When she stepped outside for the last time, she saw them gathering again, the men of Copper Creek, watching to be sure she left. Later, they would tell themselves they had no choice, that a mining town wasn't fit for a woman alone, that forcing her out was a mercy. Clara straightened her back and walked down Main Street with the last of her dignity. Elowen whimpered softly, and Clara hummed a lullaby. The same one her mother had sung long ago, before a cholera took her, before Clara married Samuel and followed Hope westward to a place that had promised everything and delivered only loss. At the edge of town, where buildings gave way to scrub and endless prairie, Clara turned back once. Copper Creek lay below, like an open wound. Raw lumber, slag heaps, smoke curling from chimneys and the smelter. Somewhere within that sprawl lay Samuel's grave, marked by a wooden cross already doomed to rot. She hadn't even been allowed to say goodbye. "Come on, Elowen," she whispered. "We're not wanted here." And with that, Clara Whitfield stepped into the wilderness, her child pressed to her chest, her fate sealed by those who measured a woman's worth only by the sons she bore. Behind her, the men of Copper Creek watched until she became a speck against the horizon, then turned back to digging wealth from the earth, satisfied they had protected their town from the curse of a woman who dared give birth to a daughter. None of them noticed the lone rider on the ridge. He watched with eyes that had seen too much cruelty to be shocked, but not enough to forget how injustice felt. He waited until the woman vanished from the town's sight, then followed at a distance, leading a spare horse and carrying a debt that time had not erased. The sun stood at its highest when Clara's legs finally failed. She collapsed beside a dry creek bed, her body trembling with fever and exhaustion. Elowen cried weakly, and Clara tried to nurse her again, fear tightening her chest as the milk faltered. Then she heard it. Hooves striking hard ground. Her heart slammed. Had Wade Hargreaves's men followed her? Or were they outlaws, drawn by the sight of a lone woman? The rider emerged slowly, and Clara's breath caught. He was Apache, tall, lean, sitting easy in the saddle. Long black hair fell down his back, bound with a single eagle feather. Scars traced his skin, one across his cheekbone, another vanishing beneath his buckskin shirt. He led a second horse, a paint mare burdened with supplies. Clara pulled Elowen closer, trying to rise, failing. She remembered the stories. Whispered warnings passed between women over wash tubs. But she had no strength to flee, no weapon to defend herself. So she lifted her eyes and waited. The warrior dismounted with quiet grace, studying her with an unreadable expression. When he spoke, his voice was low, accented, but his English was clear. "You are Samuel Whitfield's woman." It was not a question. Clara nodded, fear and confusion twisting together in her chest. "My name is Kyle, though you'd say it different in your tongue," the Apache warrior said, voice low and steady. "Your husband saved my life once, at Willow Springs. I carry that debt." Clara Whitfield's mind swirled. Samuel had never spoken of saving a man's life, let alone an Apache warrior. Then again, there were parts of his past he'd kept locked away. "Samuel's gone," she managed, barely more than a whisper. "I know." Kyle nodded toward the mountains. "I was there. I saw the mine fall. I saw them bury him. And today, I watched them cast you out for giving life to a daughter." He didn't say it cruelly, just plain truth. Tears welled in Clara's eyes again. "Then you know I have nothing. No way to repay whatever he did." "The debt ain't yours," Kale interrupted. "It's mine. He spared my life. So I protect what was his." His gaze shifted to Elowen. "You and the child. You come with me." Clara stared at him. "I can't. You don't understand. They'll hunt us. Wade Hargreaves won't let this stand. A white woman, going with..." She faltered. with a savage. Kyle's lips tugged at something like amusement. Let them ride. I've survived 10 winters of war. I don't fear mine rats. He stepped closer. Clara flinched, her body tensing against the dry creek bed. But Cale knelt beside her, not with threat, but with the calm skill of a man who tended more wounds than he could count. You're burning up, he said, fingers hovering near her damp brow. Child needs warmth, milk. You'll both be gone by morning if you stay. His words struck like a hammer through her fear. She looked down at Elowen, so tiny, so helpless. Her baby depended on a mother whose body was failing her. What choice was left? Die here, or place her trust in a scarred warrior who claimed to owe her husband his life? Can you stand? Kyle asked. Clara tried, failed, again. Without a word, Cale moved to lift her. His touch was rough from years of war and weather, but careful, surprisingly so. He smelled of leather, horses, sage smoke, and dust. Not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. Not like the cold whiskey breath of Copper Creek men. The child, he said. Clara hesitated, then let him take Elowen while he guided her onto the paint mare. The baby looked impossibly small in his sun-scarred hands, but he held her steady, secure. You've held a child before, she said without thinking. Many, Kyle replied. My sister Naya has 5. Once Clara was settled in the saddle, he handed Elowen back and tied what little she carried behind the saddle horn. You know how to ride? Yes. It was one of the few things she'd insisted on learning when they came west. Samuel had laughed, but never stopped her. Kyle swung onto his own horse, a dark bay stallion that moved like it knew battle. We go now, he said. As if summoned by his words, dust kicked up behind them. Riders, coming fast. Clara's heart dropped. They're coming. Copper Creek men, Cale muttered, his voice tight. Cowards, all of them, many against one. He turned in the saddle. Can you gallop? I'll have to, Clara replied, tightening her grip on Elowen. They took off, hooves pounding across hard-packed dirt. Clara clung to the saddle horn, her child pressed tight, her vision swimming. The paint mare followed Cale's stallion like a shadow, smooth, confident, as if she'd done this 100 times before. Behind them, angry shouts rose, then gunfire. Clara ducked low, shielding Elowen. Prayers tumbled from her lips as the shots rang past. Kysel led them into a dry ravine, winding through broken stone and thickets. The canyon broke their pursuers' line of sight. A few more shots, further now. Then, silence. They didn't stop for what felt like hours, though it was likely less than one. Clara swayed dangerously in the saddle. Cale moved beside her, one hand reaching out to steady her. Not far now, he said. There's shelter. She blinked at him. Why? Her voice was cracked from dust and disbelief. Why help us? Kyle looked forward for a long moment, as if seeing a memory. Your husband found me after a battle. I was half dead. He could have taken my scalp for bounty. He didn't. He gave me water, dressed my wounds, gave me his horse so I could get away. He turned to her, quiet. He talked about you. Said you were different. That you looked at people, not just skin. Clara's throat tightened. That sounded like Samuel, always choosing the harder right, not the easier wrong. He would have been furious, Kyle said, to see what they did to you. He told me once, the white men fear strong women more than they fear us Apache. Maybe more. They reached a grove of cottonwoods, just as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and fire. Nestled deep in the trees stood a hidden cabin, so well blended into the woods that Clara Whitfield nearly missed it. Kyle helped her down from the saddle, catching her gently as her knees gave way beneath her. Inside, the place was small but tidy. Buffalo hides lined the sleeping platform, shelves were neatly stacked with dried goods and herbs, and the air smelled of smoke and cedar. Kyle eased her down to rest, then turned to take Elowen from her arms. "Rest. I'll make something for the fever." Clara wanted to protest, to keep Elowen close, but she was too far gone. Her body gave up before her mind could argue. She lay still, watching through half-closed eyes as the warrior built the fire, heated water, and ground herbs with practiced care. He cleaned Elowen gently, wrapped her in soft furs, and made a sugar teat from cloth and honey to soothe her cries. "You know your way around babies," Clara murmured. "A warrior learns what he must to survive," Kyle replied without turning. He brought her a tin cup filled with bitter-smelling tea. "Drink, all of it." She obeyed, wincing at the taste. Her throat burned, but the warmth slowly seeped into her bones. "The men from town won't find this place," Cale said. "And if they do..." He motioned to the rifle near the door, then to the knife on his belt. "I've defended it before." Clara lowered the cup, her hand steadier than before. "I don't even know how to thank you." "No thanks," Kyle said, settling Elowen back into her mother's arms before sitting cross-legged by the fire. "It's not charity. It's justice." He stared into the flames for a beat. "Your husband, Samuel. He died trying to save others when the mine collapsed. But that's not the story they'll tell." Clara's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The supports were rotting. Samuel warned them. They didn't listen. Said repairs were too costly. When the cave-in came, he went back for the others." Cale's dark eyes met hers, steady. "He spoke your name at the end. He asked that someone watch over his family." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks. Of course Samuel had gone back. Of course he'd thought of others before himself. And of course Wade Hargreaves had twisted it into just another accident, swept the truth beneath the dust and blood. "Sleep now," Kyle said softly. "Tomorrow brings what it brings. Tonight, you and the child are safe." Clara wanted to ask about the debt, about Kyle's past, about this hidden cabin and the supplies stocked with such precision. But the medicine was already taking hold. Her limbs felt heavy, her mind softer. The last thing she saw was Cale, silhouetted by the firelight, sharpening his knife with slow, rhythmic care, watching over them like a sentry in the night. For the first time since Samuel died, Clara didn't feel alone. It should have frightened her, placing her life and her daughters in the hands of a man from a world so foreign to hers. But instead, as Elowen nursed quietly and the fever began to lift, Clara felt something she'd believed lost: hope. Outside, darkness settled over the prairie. Somewhere beyond the cottonwoods, the men of Copper Creek camped, unwilling to chase an Apache warrior into unfamiliar land after sundown. They returned to town with tales of a madwoman who'd chosen to ride with savages, justifying their decision to cast her out. But in a hidden cabin, by a flickering fire, a warrior kept his word. Not to a tribe, not to blood, but to honor, a promise made to a dying man, to protect the ones he'd left behind. The world might divide people by color, by name, by the cruel lines of what should and shouldn't be. But here, none of that mattered. Morning came too fast. The sound of hooves shattered the quiet. Kael was already moving, rifle in hand, scanning through the slats in the wall. 15 men, he said. Your friend Hargreaves is leading them. Clara's stomach turned. She pushed herself upright, weak but sharper than yesterday. Eowyn stirred in her arms, already beginning to fuss for milk. They won't find this place, Kyle said. Not yet. But they search in patterns. Military training. We go now. He worked swiftly, packing meat, hardtack, and herbs into saddlebags. Clara forced herself to stand, helped him as best she could. Where will we go? She asked. North first, to throw them off. Then west toward the sacred hills. My people winter there. He paused. Unless you prefer Fort Laramie. Might be easier to disappear there. Clara thought of it. A military fort, law and order of some sort. But also suspicion, judgment. Likely not much better than Copper Creek had been. Your people? Would they accept us? You're under my protection, Kyle said firmly. That's enough. He handed her a bundle. Dress warm. The clothes were soft deerskin, trimmed in fur. Clara hesitated for only a moment, then changed quickly. Survival left little room for pride. They slipped out of the cabin while mist still hugged the trees. Kyle moved like smoke. Silent, sure. The horses were saddled and ready. He helped Clara up, then handed Eowyn to her, now wrapped in rabbit fur. If there's a fight, Kyle said, his voice low, ride north. Don't look back. The paint knows the trail to my people. If something happens, she'll carry you. Kyle's voice was calm but firm, unshakable. I'm not leaving you, Clara Whitfield said through gritted teeth. You will, he replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. The child comes first. Samuel would have said the same. No more was said. They led the horses through the shallow stream to throw off any trackers, then climbed onto the high ridge where the rocky terrain would hide their trail. Behind them, faint voices echoed through the still air. The men from Copper Creek were closing in. For nearly an hour, they moved fast, but cautious. Kyle kept scanning the trail behind them, like a predator watching for threat. Then, a shout split the air. They'd been seen. Now we run, Kyle said, and kicked his stallion into a gallop. The world blurred. The horses thundered across open prairie, sagebrush flashing past. Eowyn cried from the jolt and motion, but Clara could do nothing but cling to her and pray the mare beneath them didn't falter. Gunfire cracked behind them. Bullets hissed past like angry bees, some striking close, sending up dust. Kyle led them through a gauntlet of terrain that would have bucked any green rider, down steep gullies, across fast creeks, through twisted bramble that tore at their sleeves but gave precious cover. His understanding of the land was unmatched. Every bend, every rise used with purpose. But the men behind were relentless, and they had fresh horses. By midday, the gap had closed. Clara could see their faces now. Familiar ones turned savage. Orrin Blackwell, Caleb Dawson, men she once shared supper with, now twisted by hatred, hunting her like game. There, Kyle pointed to a rock formation ahead. We hold here. He reined in hard and pulled Clara from the saddle, nearly dragging her and Eowyn into a narrow crevice between two boulders. Stay low. Don't move, no matter what. Clara nodded, breath ragged, heart pounding. Kyle moved fast, rifle in hand, body low. He took position with a clear sight line over the approach. His first shot rang out, then another. A scream. A horse fell hard, rider flung to the ground. The others scrambled for cover. Silence fell, broken only by Elowen's whimper and the dry wind pushing through the stone. "Give up the woman," came a shout. It was Wade Hargreaves. His voice filled the canyon like a curse. "She ain't yours to protect. She belongs with her own." Kyle didn't answer with words. His rifle did. The shot forced Wade to dive behind a rock, swearing. "You're hiding a whore in her, bastard," Oren bellowed. "What, you already claimed her for yourself? Is that it?" Clara burned with fury and shame. So quick they were to twist truth into filth. They couldn't fathom honor that crossed bloodlines, couldn't see protection without possession. Then, movement, from the flank. Clara heard it, the soft crunch of boots against gravel. They were trying to surround Kale. She pressed herself deeper into the stone, muffling Elowen's cries with the folds of her coat. Gunfire burst again, closer this time. Kale moved like a shadow, firing, shifting, disappearing. But it was one man against many. Clara saw a round strike near his head, another ripping through the fabric at his shoulder, staining it red. She bit her lip, holding back a scream. Then, another sound. Something different. War cries, not one but many, echoing off the canyon walls. Over the ridge came riders, Apache warriors, their faces marked for war. Feathers and paint flashing like firelight. At their head rode a woman on a spotted horse, her expression fierce, eyes like lightning. The men from Copper Creek froze. 15 against 1 was easy math. 15 against 20. Not so much. The woman raised her voice in accented English. "You turn around now, or you feed the ravens." Wade Hargreaves rose just enough to shout back, "She's a criminal. We have the right to—" An arrow hit the ground inches from his boots. Another warrior had his bow already drawn with a second arrow notched. "You go now," the woman repeated, not yelling, just declaring. The men looked at one another, calculating. The edge they thought they had vanished with the sound of hoofbeats on stone. Wade growled at the rocks. "You think you can stay hid with savages forever? This ain't over." But they were already retreating, dragging their wounded, spitting curses, casting hateful glances as they fled. The Apache riders followed, just far enough to make sure the retreat was real. Kyle emerged, blood running down his arm, breath hard. The woman rode to him immediately, dismounted, and spoke rapidly in Apache. Clara only caught fragments, her name and Samuel's. Kale's voice called out across the still rocks, "It's safe now. Come on out." Clara Whitfield crawled from the crevice, legs trembling as she rose. Around her, a ring of Apache warriors stood silent, studying her. Some with guarded eyes, others with open curiosity. Dust and blood stained their skin, but their presence was solid, calm. The woman who led them, the one on the spotted horse, dismounted with quiet authority. She walked with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm Naya," she said. "Kyle is my brother." Her gaze shifted to Elowen, wrapped snugly against Clara's chest. This is the child they cast out. Because she was born a girl? Clara nodded, unable to force words through the knot in her throat. Naya made a low, angry sound. "White men are fools. A daughter brings life. A daughter continues the people." She turned to Kale, eyes narrowing. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," he said. "Nothing?" She pulled back the torn sleeve. "It's a bullet wound. I've had worse. You'll have worse still if it festers. I'll tend it." She looked back to Clara. "You ride?" "Yes." Clara answered, still breathless. "Good. We go." This place is too open. And just like that, the war party formed up, flanking Cale, Clara, and the child at the center. Clara found herself surrounded, not as a prisoner, but as someone under protection. Some of the warriors were little more than boys. Others bore the hard-earned lines and scars of long campaigns. All of them looked at her, curious, cautious, respectful. They rode for hours, stopping only to rest the horses and let Naya clean Cale's wound with expert hands. Then she turned to Clara, checking her pulse, her skin, the flush in her cheeks. "The fever's broken." Naya nodded with approval. "You're strong, for a white woman. Your man chose well." Clara's voice cracked. "He was a good man. Kyle says he died with honor. That is a good death." Naya gave Alawan a few careful sips of water from a skin. "The child is strong. She will grow like her mother, fierce." By the time the sun began to set, they crested a ridge, and Clara gasped. Below lay a sprawling valley. Smoke curled from lodge fires. Children ran between teepees. Dogs barked and played. Laughter rang out. It was a village, a whole world hidden from the reach of soldiers and settlers. "My people winter here," Cale said, his voice soft with pride. "Safe from those who bring war. You stay as long as you wish." Clara stared at the peaceful scene. It was everything Copper Creek wasn't. No greed, no judgment, no cruel whispers. Just life. "What if I wanted to stay?" she asked quietly. Kyle glanced at his sister. Naya met his eyes, then turned to Clara. "Then you learn our ways," she said. "You work. You give back. It's not easy, but it's honest." As they rode into the village, a drumbeat echoed, announcing their arrival. Faces emerged from every lodge. Women, children, elders, warriors, all staring at the white woman and her child. Clara sat tall in the saddle. She had already been judged by her own people and cast aside. Whatever judgment these eyes held, she would meet it head-on. An older woman approached the circle of riders. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes sharp as flint. She spoke softly to Kyle and Apache, then turned her gaze on Clara and Alawan. "That is Nerith," Kale said. "Our medicine woman." Nerith looked down at the child. She placed a hand on Alawan's head and murmured something in her own tongue. "She says the child carries a strong spirit." Kale translated, "Born in sorrow, but will know joy." Clara's eyes filled. No one had spoken a kind word over Alawan since the moment she was born. "Tell her, thank you." Nerith smiled faintly, then gestured toward a large lodge near the center of camp. "You sleep there tonight," Naya said. "Tomorrow, we see what comes." Clara followed them, holding Alawan tightly. Every step deeper into the village made her more aware of the strange turn her life had taken. Cast out for giving birth to a daughter, she'd found sanctuary among those her world called savages. And yet, here, in a place without polished churches or stone buildings, she had seen more kindness, more reverence for life, than any preacher in Copper Creek had ever shown. That night, the fever returned with a vengeance. Clara woke in darkness, soaked with sweat and her body burning hot. Alawan cried weakly beside her. And with growing panic, Clara realized her milk had dried up completely. The baby's cries turned desperate. Clara tried to soothe her, tried everything, but nothing worked. Her arms trembled. Her breath shortened. And then, the flap of the lodge lifted. Cold air rushed in as the lodge flap lifted, revealing Cale's silhouette framed against a sky full of stars. He took one look at the scene. Clara Whitfield burning with fever, Alawan crying weakly, and vanished. Moments later, He returned with Nerith, the village's medicine woman, and Naya, his sister. "The birth fever has returned," Nerith said. Her voice low and steady, translated through Naya. "It happens sometimes. It is dangerous." Clara tried to sit up, but the world spun like a wagon wheel on broken ground. "Elowen, she needs—" "We know," Naya soothed. "Ashen has a baby son. She can feed your daughter." Through the haze of sickness, Clara watched as a young Apache woman entered, lifted Elowen with practiced grace, and cradled her close. The baby latched quickly, suckling with desperate hunger. Relief flooded Clara's chest, along with a pang of helplessness. The medicine woman began her work. She crushed herbs, stirred steaming pots, heated smooth stones in the fire. All the while, she chanted in her native tongue. Clara didn't understand the words, but the rhythm of it calmed her frayed nerves. Warm hands lifted her head. Bitter tea was pressed to her lips. Heated stones wrapped in damp leather were placed gently on her aching belly. "You must fight," Naya said, firm but not unkind. "Your daughter needs her mother." But Clara felt herself drifting, slipping beneath dark waters where Samuel's voice called gently, promising rest, peace, the end of all this pain and judgment. And then, unexpectedly, it was Cale's voice that broke through the fog. "I gave my word to a dying man," he said, his English halting, rough with emotion. "His woman, his child. I promised I would protect them." Clara tried to open her eyes. "You die," Kyle said. "I break my word. I fail my brother, the man who saved me when he had no reason." He was kneeling beside her now, the fire casting flickers across his scarred face, his voice shaking with conviction. "Samuel saw me. Not enemy, not scalp for bounty. He saw a man. That makes him my brother." Clara's throat tightened. "You don't die," Kyle said fiercely. "I won't allow it." The sheer certainty in his voice pulled her back from the edge. She focused on the sound of Elowen nursing quietly, on the cool cloth against her skin, on the medicine woman's chant circling through the dark. The fever didn't leave without a fight. But by dawn, it had broken for good. Clara lay there, too weak to move, but with her mind clear for the first time in days. Elowen slept peacefully nearby, swaddled in a cradleboard decorated with simple beadwork and fur lining. "She's full," Naya said, stepping in with a bowl of hot broth. Ashen fed her through the night. "She lost a daughter last winter," she added. "Says your baby helps heal her heart." Tears slipped from Clara's eyes. Kindness from strangers, when her own people had turned their backs. For the next 3 days, she recovered slowly, fed, washed, and cared for by Naya and Nerith. Kyle came and went, sitting by the fire in silence or telling stories of Samuel. How they'd met, the things they'd survived together, the laughter they shared without needing the same language. "He spoke of you often," Kyle said one evening. "Said you read books, taught numbers, said you were too good for mining life." Clara smiled faintly. He was wrong. I wasn't good enough. Couldn't even give him a son. Kyle's expression darkened. "That is sickness. White man's sickness. Thinking sons matter more." He leaned forward. "My people know. Women are sacred. They carry life. They hold the stories. Without daughters, there is no tomorrow." On the 4th day, Clara stood, weak but steady. She stepped outside the lodge, blinking at the bright winter sun. Ashen showed her how to secure Elowen on her back with the cradleboard. leaving her hands free. Women watched her as she moved, curious but not unkind, wondering about this pale woman who had chosen their world over her own. That evening, just as the sun kissed the tips of the distant ridges, shouts rang out at the camp's edge. Scouts returned, faces grim. "Soldiers," one said, "coming from the south, searching for white captives." Clara Whitfield's heart pounded like a war drum. Would they drag her away? Would her presence bring danger to these people who had taken her in when no one else would? She watched as the Apache elders gathered in council. She couldn't follow the flow of the language, but she caught glimpses. Her name, Samuel's, and Cale speaking with gravity and calm authority. Finally, Orson Redfeather, the leader Cale had called chief, turned to her. Naya stood by his side, translating. "You are not a prisoner," Naya said. "You are guest, protected by one of our warriors. If soldiers come, you choose. Go with them, or stay. We will not force either way." Clara met Redfeather's gaze. "And if I choose to stay?" Naya nodded. "Then you are one of us for the winter. When spring comes, we see what your heart says then." The soldiers arrived the next morning. 20 men rode into the valley in straight, stiff lines, led by a nervous young lieutenant barely past boyhood. Clara watched from the shadows of a teepee, her breath tight. Kajal stood tall beside the elders. The council met them openly, without fear. "We've received reports," the lieutenant said, voice high with tension, "that a white woman and infant are being held here. We're here to retrieve them." "No one is held here," Redfeather said evenly. "All in this place are here by choice. I'll need to confirm that myself." After more back and forth, Clara was called forward. She stepped out slowly, Elowen bundled on her back in the cradleboard Naya had gifted her. She wore soft doeskin, Apache made, and her face was calm. The lieutenant blinked in shock. "Ma'am, are you Clara Whitfield from Copper Creek?" "I am." "Your brother-in-law sent word you'd been kidnapped. We're here to bring you back." Clara almost laughed. Orrin Blackwell, the man who'd spat on her doorstep and tossed her out with a newborn in her arms, now sending soldiers to rescue her? "I wasn't taken," Clara said. "I was dying. My child was starving. Cale found us, saved us. That's the only truth that matters." The officer looked stunned, unsure. "Ma'am, surely you don't mean to stay. With them? It's not proper. Think of your daughter." "I am thinking of her," Clara snapped, her voice rising like fire. "Back in Copper Creek, she was thrown away because she was born a girl. Here, she is cherished. Here, we are fed, sheltered, safe. But wouldn't you be better among your own kind?" Clara's eyes sharpened. "My own kind left me to die in the dirt." The lieutenant shifted awkwardly. "Mr. Hargreaves says it was a misunderstanding. He's willing to take you back." That did it. Clara laughed, a short, bitter sound. "The only misunderstanding was mine." Thinking folks in Copper Creek still knew what the word Christian meant. Around them, tension thickened. Kaisel's hand hovered near his knife. Other warriors read the shift in tone, shifting their weight, eyes narrowing. The soldiers sensed it too, hands drifting toward rifles. "Please," Clara said quickly, turning back to the lieutenant. "Tell whoever asks, I am here of my own free will. I am treated well. My daughter and I are safe." The lieutenant clearly wanted to protest more, but 20 men, no matter how well trained, were surrounded by 100 warriors. He swallowed his words. If you change your mind, ma'am. Fort Laramie. We'll be there. Clara nodded once. Thank you. When the soldiers rode out, the silence left behind was different. Not tension, but release. Something inside her had shifted. She hadn't just survived. She had chosen, not fear, not shame, but a new road altogether. That night, Nareth entered her lodge with a bundle of paints and brushes. Naya stood behind her, smiling. She paints your face for ceremony, Naya explained. You walk with us now. Clara sat still as the old woman's fingers moved across her cheeks, her brow, her chin. The designs were sacred. She didn't know their meaning, but she felt the power in them. And as she sat there, she thought of all the sermons she'd sat through back in Copper Creek, about salvation, about heathens, about who was worthy. And yet here, among those called savages, she had been fed when starving, sheltered when cold, healed when dying, and valued when worthless in the eyes of her own people. That, she thought, was the real gospel. Kyle appeared in the doorway just as Nareth finished. He studied her quietly for a long moment, then gave a slow, approving nod. Tomorrow, he said, I teach you to shoot. Clara blinked. A woman alone, he added, must protect what's hers. I'm not alone, she replied softly. Kyle's rare smile softened his hardened face. No, he said, not anymore. That night, drums echoed across the valley. Firelight flickered over dancers and faces, old and young. Clara sat with Elowen nursing at her breast, Ashen beside her, teaching her which herbs would help the milk come back strong. Around her, different clothes, different words, but the same truths. Warmth, laughter, community, a place to belong. And in the back of her mind, Clara thought of Samuel, and she smiled. She often wondered what Samuel Whitfield might think if he could see her now, his widow and child living among the Apache. But then she remembered the way he'd spoken of Cale, how he had seen past bloodlines, beyond names and skin. Samuel had always looked at people, not labels. Clara thought maybe, just maybe, he would have understood, maybe even been proud. Elowen stirred gently in the cradleboard at her side, letting out a soft sigh of comfort. Clara leaned down and kissed her daughter's soft, dark hair, cast out for being born a girl. But here she would grow in a place where women were revered, where her worth wasn't measured by what she couldn't do, but honored for what she would become. It wasn't the life Clara had imagined. But as Cale handed her a bowl of rabbit stew and Naya sat nearby teaching her Apache words by firelight, she realized something. This might not be the life she planned, but it was the one she was always meant to find. Winter wrapped its arms around the Black Hills like a silent sentinel. Cold, harsh, but not unkind if you knew how to live within its rules. Clara learned to bank the fire so it wouldn't die overnight. She watched how the birds moved in the sky to read changes in the weather. She learned how to stretch dried meat and roots to feed many mouths. And Elowen thrived. Her cheeks grew round and pink, her laughter echoing between teepees. The women passed her from arm to arm, delighted in her every coo and babble. She became a child of the camp, a child of everyone. But then, the whispers came. Traders brought word from the settlements. Wade Hargreaves had put out a bounty, $500 for Clara Whitfield's location, $1,000 for her capture. He claimed she had stolen documents, mining deeds, company property, that she possessed something vital to the future of Copper Creek mining. He's growing desperate, Kyle muttered after hearing the news. But why now? I don't know, Clara said honestly. I only left with Samuel's Bible and the clothes on my back. That night, unable to sleep, Clara finally opened the Bible. She hadn't touched it since Samuel's death, as she flipped through the worn pages, searching for peace. Something fluttered loose. A folded paper, then another, and another. Her hands trembling, Clara held them to the firelight, and her breath stopped. It wasn't just scripture tucked inside, it was evidence. Samuel's handwriting, careful and steady. Mining claims, deeds. But beyond that, ledgers, names, numbers, dates, a trail of corruption tied directly to Wade Hargreaves. He had cheated dozens of miners, forged claims, arranged accidents. People had died. People Samuel had tried to warn. And now, in her lap, sat everything needed to hang Hargreaves. At the bottom was a letter, short, firm, in Samuel's hand. If anything happens to me, take these to Fort Laramie. Trust no one in Copper Creek. Find Captain Marcus Hale. He is honest. Clara sat frozen. Samuel had known. He'd been gathering evidence. That mine collapse, it hadn't been fate. It had been murder. At dawn, she showed the papers to Cale. Naya translated. Cale's face went cold. Your husband, he said, was a warrior. Not with rifle, but with truth. This is why they silenced him. I have to get this to Fort Laramie, Clara said. To Captain Hale. Too dangerous, Cale replied. Hargreaves watches every trail, and winter is no friend to the weak. But if we wait until spring, he'll bury the truth, bribe the witnesses, burn what matters. That evening, a scout rode into camp, his face grim. Riders coming? He said. Not bluecoats, not settlers, mercenaries, hired guns, led by a half-blood tracker, the kind who never loses a trail. They come for you, Orson Redfeather said through Naya. If they find you here, they bring fire to all of us. Clara felt her stomach twist. Her presence had put these people in danger. Then I'll go, she said. Tonight. I won't let them suffer for me. If you go now, Kyle said, you die. Woman alone, in snow, with baby. Hunted, then what choice do I have? A voice rose from the edge of the circle, firm, steady. I say we fight. It was Ashen, the woman who had nursed Elowen when Clara could not. She stepped forward without hesitation. This woman is our sister, she declared. Her enemies are ours. Others began to murmur agreement. Some nodded. But Clara saw the unease too, in shoulders tense, in eyes uncertain. Not everyone wanted war for a white woman. The chief raised his hand. We meet in council tonight, Orson Redfeather said. We decide as one. And so Clara waited, knowing the lives of many now hung on a decision that wasn't hers. The camp moved as it always did, children laughing, women weaving, warriors sharpening arrows by firelight. But Clara Whitfield saw it all through a different lens. She knew what was coming, and she knew it was because of her. Elowen sat in the snow, babbling cheerfully with Ashen's son, the two infants sharing wide-eyed joy like the world wasn't about to tip into violence. How could she let blood spill in a place so full of life? As dusk crept over the hills, Kyle stepped into her teepee. Pack light, he said, voice low. Only what you need. Clara froze. The council cast their vote? They argue still, he replied. I don't. His jaw was set like a mountain. I gave my word to a dying man. I'll keep it. We leave in 1 hour. Kyle, no. Your people... My people survive because we know when to fight and when to run, he said. Tonight, we run. Later, maybe we turn and fight. He was gone before she could say another word. Clara packed in silence, her fingers trembling. She tucked the damning documents back into Samuel's Bible, wrapped warm clothes around Aloan, stuffed what little food she could carry into her satchel. She had just finished when Naya entered. "Foolish brother," she muttered, though affection flickered in her eyes. "He thinks he does this alone." She handed Clara a bundle. Inside, food, blankets, a revolver. "Do you know how to use this?" she asked. "Kale's been teaching me." "Good. You may need it." Then Naya hugged her, quick and fierce. "You are our sister. We don't forget that." They slipped out under the cover of night. Kyle led the way, Clara behind him with Aloan bundled tight against her chest. To her surprise, 3 other warriors joined them. One was Ashen's husband. "I am Tarek," he said. "You healed my wife's heart. I will help you now." They rode hard, navigating through terrain that seemed impossible in the dark. Rocky switchbacks, frozen creeks, thick woods that clawed at their coats. No sound of pursuit. Not yet. The dust-hollow men would wait for sunrise, assuming she was still in camp. By morning, they were deep into the high country. The snow was thicker now, and the horses struggled. Aloan, wrapped close, barely made a sound, as if even the child knew the cost of noise. Kyle raised a hand suddenly, his eyes sharp. "Riders," he said. "Fast. Gaining." One of the warriors cursed. "Tracker's good." "Too good," another added. Almost unnatural. They pushed the horses harder, but there was only so much strength left in them. By afternoon, the posse was close enough to see. Clara recognized several men from Copper Creek. Orrin Blackwell, Caleb Dawson. But it was the man at the front that turned her blood to ice. A gaunt rider with hollow, pit-black eyes. His teeth were filed to points. Around his neck, a necklace of human scalps. "Rafe Calder," Tarek growled. "He hunts anything. Man, woman, child. He has no soul." A shot cracked through the cold air. Then another. They were in range. Cale veered hard, leading them into a narrow canyon flanked by steep, icy walls. It was shelter, but it was also a trap. If the enemy blocked the entrance, they were penned in like game. "Here," Cale said. "We make our stand." He turned to Tarek. "Take the woman. Ride for the far side." "I won't leave you to die," Clara said, voice shaking. "Not dying," Kyle said with a rare smile. "Just buying time." He unslung his rifle. "I'm hard to kill. Ask anyone." There was no time for argument. Tarek grabbed the reins and spurred forward, pushing Clara's horse ahead while gunfire exploded behind them. Kyle and the 2 other warriors held their ground, returning fire with deadly precision. The canyon twisted ahead. Snow spilled down from above with each thunderous echo. Then they hit a wall, a rockfall, not enough to stop a man, but too tight for a horse. Tarek dismounted instantly. "We climb." Clara looked up at the steep, ice-covered slope. "With Aloan?" No choice. She swallowed her fear and tightened the cradleboard straps. Aloan barely stirred, buried against her heartbeat. Then they climbed, hand over hand, foot on slick stone, snow in her face, muscles screaming, the sound of gunfire still booming behind them like distant thunder. Halfway up, her boots slipped. She fell, skidding down 5 feet before Tarek caught her wrist, barely keeping his own balance. "No stopping," he said. "We must reach the top." She nodded, breath burning in her lungs. And they climbed. Toward the sky. Toward the edge. Because there was no going back. Alawan began to cry, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like a flare in the silence. Clara Whitfield clutched her tighter, heart pounding. They were almost there. Almost. Then a voice broke the air like a cold knife. "Well, well," it drawled from above. Clara looked up and saw him. Rafe Calder, standing atop the canyon rim, rifle resting easy in his grip like a snake coiled to strike. "Seems your trail ends here, Miss Whitfield. Thorne's paying handsomely for you. Though, truth be told, he didn't say you had to be alive." Tension snapped like a whip. Tarek shifted beside her, hand brushing his weapon, but the angle was useless. They were pinned. Calder grinned wider. "Now the baby, that's extra. Plenty of buyers for white-skinned babes. Course, maybe she's a half-breed by now, but hell, some folks don't mind." Clara felt her knees buckle with horror. Alawan whimpered against her chest. Then, a crack split the air. Calder staggered. Confusion overtook his smug expression. And then he pitched forward, arms flailing as he tumbled from the ridge. His body crashed down the canyon wall, landing in a heap near the rocks below. At the edge of the cliff, Kyle appeared, rifle still smoking in his hands. Blood ran down the side of his face from a head wound, but he was standing. "I told you," he muttered. "Very hard to kill." Another warrior climbed up beside him, only one. The third hadn't made it. Together, they hauled Clara and Tarek the rest of the way up. Below, Calder's men hesitated. Their leader was gone. The canyon, a death trap. The advantage was lost. Confusion turned to retreat. "They'll pull back," Cale said. "Regroup, but we've earned time." Clara turned to him. "Your friend?" Kyle nodded solemnly. "He died as a warrior. His name will be honored." They scavenged fresh horses left by Calder's men and rode hard through the falling night. By the time stars glimmered high above, lights from Fort Laramie shimmered on the horizon. "We part here," said Tarek, dismounting. "Soldiers won't welcome us like they will you." Clara stepped down with Alawan still wrapped against her, heart too full to speak. She turned to Cale. "I can't repay this." Kyle stopped her. "Samuel's debt is paid, but this—" He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small leather pouch, pressing it gently into her hands. "For Alawan," he said, "when she's old enough to understand. Tell her she has kin among the Apache. Always." Then they disappeared into the dark like mist over the plain. Clara walked the last mile alone. But she didn't feel alone. She carried with her the evidence that could shatter a powerful man's empire. And she carried Alawan, no longer a child born in shame, but one raised in honor. Somewhere behind her, Wade Hargreaves' hired killers licked their wounds. They'd report back that the woman was more trouble than expected, that she had allies, dangerous ones. But Clara Whitfield was no longer the fevered, discarded widow cast out by Copper Creek. She had faced snowstorms and shootouts. She'd learned to ride, to shoot, and to trust where no one expected her to. She had become something else entirely. When she stepped out of the dark before Fort Laramie's gates, the sentries nearly fired on sight. Wild-haired, wrapped in furs, a child at her chest. It was only her cry that stopped them. "I need Captain Marcus Hale," she shouted. "I have proof of murder and theft." Within the hour, she was seated across from the captain in a warm, oil lamp-lit office. Alawan slept peacefully in her arms. Hale, stern, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, read Samuel's papers slowly, line by line. His face darkened with each turn of the page. "These documents," he said finally, "detail a criminal operation on a massive scale. Your husband was investigating Hargreaves." "He was," Clara said, her voice firm. "And they killed him for it." "Made it look like a mine collapse?" Clara nodded. "He warned them. The supports were rotten. Hargreaves refused to act." Captain Hale called in his aide. "Send word to Cheyenne. Tell the Union Marshals we're launching a full investigation." Then he looked back to Clara. "You'll need to testify. It may be dangerous." She let out a breath that carried months of survival. "Captain, I've been shot at, hunted across snow, nearly died more than once. I'm not afraid of Wade Hargreaves anymore." He allowed a rare smile. "Good. Because what your husband uncovered, it goes beyond Copper Creek. These ledgers show copper sold off-book to foreign buyers. No taxes, no inspections. That puts this in the hands of Washington." He arranged for Clara and Alawan to stay within the fort's walls, simple quarters, but warm and clean, with real beds, with real food. It was the first time in months she had felt safe. But safety came with its own weight. Not everyone in the fort welcomed her. The officers' wives looked at her like something feral dragged in from the woods. Her skin had toughened under months of wind and winter sun. Her hands bore the calluses of survival. And the way she moved, confident, unbowed, unsettled those who saw only lace and manners as measures of civility. They whispered behind gloved hands and pinched smiles, their stares lingering too long. The story of Clara Whitfield had spread fast through Fort Laramie, twisted by gossip into something wild. She overheard Eleanor Pike murmur, "Lived like a savage, poor creature. No wonder she seems altered." Another voice added, "And the child, heaven knows what blood's in her veins now." Clara wanted to shout the truth, to tell them about Ashen, who'd fed her baby from her own body, about Naya, who taught her to stitch and speak in a tongue full of meaning, about Cale, who bled for them without question. But she stayed silent. The case against Wade Hargreaves needed her poised, credible, untouched by the truth of where she'd found safety. So she let them dress her in stiff petticoats and borrow dignity. Let them tame her hair, repaint her face, and try to scrub away what they could never understand. She wore the mask they gave her, and buried the warmth of the Apache camp deep in her heart. 2 weeks later, Marshal Owen Pike arrived with federal investigators, grim, straight-backed, and known for tearing corruption out by the root. He listened to Clara's entire account without once interrupting. When she mentioned Cale, Marshal Pike raised a brow. "Cale, I remember him from treaty talks. Impressive man. You trust him?" Clara met his gaze. "With my life. With Alawan's." "Good," Pike said, "because I might need his word as much as yours. Some of these murders happened on tribal lands. If the Apache saw anything, their testimony could break this case wide open." Her heart fluttered. An official reason to see him again. But she kept her face calm. "He may agree, if you approach with respect." The investigation cut through Copper Creek like a wildfire. Miners talked, ledgers surfaced, graves were dug up. Hargreaves's world began to crack, but not before he struck back. One night, Clara jolted awake to a shadow looming over Alawan's cradle. She moved without thinking, grabbing the revolver Naya had insisted she keep. The shot shattered the quiet. The man, a dust-hollow gunman, stumbled back through the window, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Guards burst in, but it was too late. Hargreaves now knew exactly where she was. "We're relocating you," Marshal Pike declared the next morning. "There's a place, a safe one, but it's on Apache land. They've agreed to take you in until the trial." "Agreed?" Clara gave a breathless laugh. "Marshal, there's no place I'd feel safer." 3 days later, she rode through the snow-blanketed pines, Elowen swaddled against her chest. This time, she wasn't a castaway. She came under protection of the law, with Pike and 4 Union marshals at her side. When they entered the winter camp, the grief was fresh, for the warrior who died buying them time. But the joy was deeper. Cale stood before her, formal in the presence of outsiders, but his eyes burned with quiet welcome. "You're home here," he said in measured English. "You and the little one." The federal team pitched tents just outside the circle of teepees. It was a rare alliance, Washington law working hand in hand with the Apache Nation. One by one, witnesses stepped forward. Warriors who had seen bodies dumped, women who'd heard threats, elders who knew of poisoned streams and burned-out cabins, all tied to Hargreaves's hunger for copper veins. Clara worked daily beside Pike, assembling the case. In the evenings, she sat with Naya, learning the language word by word. Elowen played in the dust with the other children, already mimicking their cadences and laughter. At night, Clara often found Kyle seated near her lodge, silent and still, keeping watch, though no one had asked him. "You don't have to," she said once, offering him a warm tin cup of tea. "I choose to," he answered. They sat together beneath a blanket of stars, the fire between them flickering low. "Well, when this is over," Clara whispered, "and Hargreaves answers for what he's done, I don't know where Elowen and I will go." Kyle didn't look away from the sky. "You have a place here. Naya speaks for you. So do the Women's Council. They see your spirit. They see how you work. And your daughter?" He nodded toward the playing children. "She already belongs." Clara hesitated. "And what about you?" He turned to her slowly, eyes reflecting firelight and something deeper. "I say Samuel chose well," he said, voice low. "His woman has the heart of a mother, the soul of a warrior, and eyes that see beyond skin." And in that moment, Clara knew. She hadn't just survived. She had become. "I say," Cale paused, finally turning his eyes to meet hers. "I say you belong wherever your spirit chooses, here or somewhere else. But if it's here, I'd be honored." Before Clara Whitfield could speak, a stir rippled across the camp. Hoofbeats thundered through the trees. Marshal Owen Pike's men rode in fast, dust and snow clinging to their coats. "We found it," Pike called out as he dismounted, face alight with triumph. Hidden chamber beneath Hargreaves's house, packed to the rafters with ledgers, letters, all of it. He held up a satchel thick with documents. Records of every bribe, every claim he stole. Murders, blackmail. Even letters from foreign buyers talking about setting up private militias, undermining federal control entirely. Clara's breath caught. "So it's over?" "Almost," Pike replied. "He'll be arrested tomorrow at dawn." Then he pulled another paper from his coat and handed it to her. "Your husband's will, validated by the courts. These shares, Clara, they're yours. The Whitfield claim is real. Turns out Samuel struck into one of the richest veins in the territory. There's also a home and a tidy account waiting in Cheyenne." Clara stared at the paper. Generational wealth. The kind of power and security she'd never dreamed possible, not as a woman, not as a mother cast aside for birthing a daughter. She could leave, start fresh, disappear into the comfort that money brings. Pike's voice softened. The mine'll need a future. You could sell to honest folks, or... He looked around the camp, lowering his voice. Or partner with the Apache Council. By treaty, they still hold rights to this land. That's long been ignored. But with you and them working together, could change everything. Jobs, equity, schools. Clara looked to Cale, then to Naya, who had quietly stepped beside her. Around her, the community she'd come to call home watched and waited. What if, Clara said, her voice growing steadier, we built something new? A mining operation that honors this land instead of bleeding it dry. One where Black, White, and Apache all work side by side, and where children learn together, in the same school, under the same roof. Pike blinked. It's idealistic. But possible, Clara pressed. With federal oversight, with community leaders, with truth. Naya translated to the elders who'd gathered. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Debates flared in Apache. Hope sparked behind weathered eyes. Then Orson Redfeather stepped forward, the camp falling quiet at his raised hand. This woman speaks of a new path, he said carefully in English. Not white, not Apache, but something shared. Difficult road. Many will hate it. He looked to Clara, then to Eloan nestled against her. But for the children, it is worth walking. That night, the fire in the center of camp roared higher than ever. No one called it a victory celebration, not yet. But it was a night of hope. Clara danced with Eloan in her arms, cheeks flushed with firelight. Laughter around her, arms outstretched in unity. She wasn't a guest anymore. She was kin. Across the flames, Cale watched her. And when their eyes locked, his quiet smile held a promise. Not loud, not urgent, but sure. Tomorrow would bring Hargreaves' arrest, a trial, endless paperwork, and the long, difficult birth of something never before attempted. There would be voices screaming, "Traitor," from both sides. But tonight, beneath stars that shimmered just as they had above Copper Creek and above the Apache lands for generations, Clara Whitfield, mother, widow, survivor, warrior in her own right, stood exactly where she was meant to be. The Cheyenne courthouse had never seen a trial like it. Miners in soot-stained shirts, town merchants in pressed collars, Apache leaders in ceremonial beadwork, Union marshals flanking the doors, journalists crammed elbow to elbow in the gallery, pencils flying. The territory of Wyoming v. Wade Hargreaves had begun. Clara sat near the front, Eloan asleep against her chest, wrapped in a hand-woven shawl gifted by Nerith. She wore the only fine dress the officers' wives had ever offered in kindness, but she wore it on her terms. Behind her, Cale sat like a stone sentinel, calm but watchful. Then Wade Hargreaves entered, manacled at the wrists, but walking with that same damned arrogance, the one that had crushed miners, burned families, and tried to bury truth in shallow graves. His eyes met Clara's, and he offered a cold, mocking smile. Lips moved. No sound. But the message was clear. This isn't over. District Attorney Marcus Fitzgerald rose, tall and solemn, his voice cut like winter air. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is not just the tale of corruption. It's the tale of one man's greed infecting an entire town, costing lives, stealing futures, and the courage of one woman who refused to die with the truth. And so, the reckoning began. Gentlemen of the jury, District Attorney Marcus Fitzgerald began, voice cutting clear through the packed Cheyenne courtroom. "We will prove that Wade Hargreaves built his empire on the backs of murdered men, stolen claims, and backdoor deals. He killed those who got in his way. He robbed honest miners blind. And he sold this country's copper to foreign hands." The defense struck back with venom. "This case," Hargreaves' slick lawyer declared, "hinges on the word of a disgraced woman, a widow who ran off to live among savages, who abandoned Christian decency, and now wants revenge for what was, at worst, a tragic mining accident." Clara Whitfield sat still, jaw set. She would not break. Not when so many had already paid the price for silence. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Miners spoke of vanished co-workers who struck lucky veins. Wives described claims swindled away through forged deeds. Then came Samuel Whitfield's files, presented in full, damning detail. Then it was Clara's turn. She walked to the stand slowly, chin high, cradling every stare with the calm of someone who'd walked through fire and come out breathing. "State your name for the record." "Clara Whitfield, widow of Samuel Whitfield." Fitzgerald led her through it. The collapsing mine, Samuel's discovery of the fraud, the plan to report it to Fort Laramie. "He came home late," she said quietly, hands folded in her lap. "Said he'd found proof Wade Hargreaves was skimming off federal shipments, selling copper meant for Union Rail to foreign buyers. He was going to ride out the next morning. But that night," she swallowed hard, "the mine collapsed." "Do you believe that collapse was intentional?" "I do. My husband inspected those supports the day before. He said someone had weakened them, deliberately." Her voice never shook. "He was killed for trying to do what was right." Then the defense attorney rose. His smile was all snake oil and sharp teeth. "Mrs. Whitfield, is it true you abandoned your husband's grave and lived with the Apache?" "I was thrown out of Copper Creek," Clara replied evenly, "because I birthed a daughter. I would have died." "Yes or no?" he snapped. "Did you live with Indians?" "Yes." "Did you partake in their heathen rituals?" "I partook in their compassion," she answered, voice clipped, "when no white Christian would lift a hand. And this one," he gestured toward Cale, eyes full of disgust. "Did you share a bed with him?" The courtroom erupted. The judge pounded the gavel. Cale started to rise, hand twitching toward where his knife would have been, if not for the law. But Naya, beside him, clutched his wrist. "I object," Fitzgerald barked. "Irrelevant." "It speaks to her character, Your Honor." Clara didn't wait for the judge. She sat tall, proud. "Cale saved my life and my daughter's. He asked nothing in return. He shielded us when men like you would have left us to die. If that's what you call improper, then yes, I'm guilty of accepting grace." A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery. Even a juror or two grinned. The defense pressed on. "These papers your husband supposedly left? How convenient they surfaced after his death. How do we know you didn't forge them?" "I can barely spell my own name," Clara said. "Samuel did the bookkeeping. Everybody back home knows that." "So you admit to being uneducated?" "I admit I wasn't schooled in books like you," she said, eyes narrowing. "But I learned plenty this past winter. I learned that honor ain't about collars or Bibles. It's in how a man keeps his word, and I learned that a warrior's promise means more than a contract signed by cowards." She turned her gaze on Hargreaves, cold and cutting. "And I learned that men like you fear strong women almost as much as you fear the truth." The courtroom fell still. When her testimony ended, she walked past Hargreaves' table. He leaned in close and muttered, "You think this is over? I've got friends, money. You'll never be safe." The judge's voice snapped across the room. "Mr. Hargreaves, did you just threaten a witness in my courtroom?" "Bailiff, make note of that." The next morning, Kyle took the stand. An Apache warrior giving testimony in federal court was something no one had seen before. He spoke slow and formal, each word careful. "Samuel Whitfield saved my life. He was honest, brave. He feared this man." He pointed to Hargreaves. "Would kill him. Asked me to protect his family if he died. So I did." He looked at the jury. "I do not break promises." The defense tried to paint him as savage, accused him of seducing Clara, of lying for her. He never flinched, never raised his voice. His calm shook the courtroom more than anger ever could. On the third day, Marshal Pike entered with a final blow. Files from Hargreaves's hidden chamber, ledgers of payouts, names of murdered men, foreign correspondence, militia blueprints, names, dates, deaths that lined up with every accident the defense had tried to dismiss. But it wasn't that evidence alone that doomed Wade Hargreaves. It was the voices of those who lived through it, and the woman they failed to silence. And the reckoning had only just begun. Orrin Blackwell, Clara Whitfield's brother-in-law, took the stand as a surprise witness for the prosecution. "Why are you testifying against Mr. Hargreaves?" Fitzgerald asked, his tone measured. Orrin looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His voice cracked. "Because I helped him, God help me. I helped kill my own brother." The courtroom gasped like it had been slapped. Clara clutched Eloin tightly to her chest. The baby stirred and whimpered. Behind her, Kyle rested a firm hand on her shoulder, steadying her like a rooted pine. "I didn't know they meant to kill him," Orrin went on, tears streaking his weathered cheeks. "Wade said they just wanted to scare Sam, make him stop digging around." He swallowed hard. "I told them when he'd be down in that part of the mine. They rigged the supports. Killed him. Killed 2 others too. Just to bury the truth." "Why speak up now?" Fitzgerald asked gently. Orrin looked directly at Clara. "Because I watched what we did to her. Kicking out a mother with a newborn. Leaving my brother's widow in the dirt. We turned into monsters. I can't carry that anymore." Suddenly, Wade Hargreaves lunged across the defense table, roaring, "You lying bastard! We had a deal." It took 3 bailiffs to hold him down. The courtroom was stunned. The mask had slipped. The jury didn't need to deliberate long. In under 2 hours, the verdict was read. Guilty on every count. Murder, conspiracy, corruption, tax fraud, abuse of federal resources. The judge, gray-haired and iron-jawed, didn't mince words. "Wade Hargreaves, you are the worst kind of man the frontier breeds. You killed for greed, shattered families for your own power, mocked the law while hiding behind it." He leaned forward, voice cold. "I sentence you to be hanged by the neck until dead." Hargreaves screamed curses, promising vengeance with every breath as they dragged him from the courtroom. But Clara didn't hear him. Her eyes were on the worn leather Bible in her lap, Samuel's Bible. She traced the edge of the pages he'd once held, the pages that had brought justice. Outside, the streets of Cheyenne were packed. Miners whistled and cheered. The Lakota delegation stood tall, proud witnesses to a rare moment of honor from federal justice. Reporters called out, "Mrs. Whitfield, what will you do now?" Clara stepped down from the courthouse steps, Elowen tucked safe in her arms. Kyle stood on one side, Naya on the other. "I'm going home," she said, "to build something new, something my husband would have stood tall behind." "Which home?" another reporter shouted. "Copper Creek? Or the Lakota village?" Clara smiled softly. "Both," she said. "Home isn't where you come from. It's where you're welcomed, where you're seen, where you can build something that lasts." As she turned to walk, another figure stepped forward, cautiously. "Oren. Clara, I know I don't deserve anything. But if I could, just know her. Know my niece." Clara looked at him for a long moment. This was the man who had helped bury Samuel, who had stood by while she was cast into the wilderness. But it was also the man who had stood in court and told the truth when it mattered most. "Justice isn't revenge," she said quietly. "You can visit her, but you'll visit her in her real home, among her people, all of them." Tears spilled freely down Oren's face. "Samuel would be proud of you," he said, voice raw. "You're stronger than any of us." Before she could answer, Marshal Owen Pike stepped beside her, tipping his hat. "We've begun seizing Hargreaves' assets," he said. "The claims, the bank accounts, the land, all of it. It'll be divided among the families he hurt, you included." Clara didn't hesitate. "Use it to build the school," she said. "Use it for fair wages, for land shared, not stolen, for what we promised." Marshal Pike nodded with a rare, respectful smile. "Your husband picked the right woman." "No," Clara replied, turning to where Cale was helping Naya settle the horses for the journey. "We chose each other, and we choose again, every day." The ride back to the Black Hills wasn't a flight anymore. It was a return, to land where new roots would grow, to a village that didn't ask her to change to be accepted, to a people who had called her sister long before the law ever would. Behind her, in Cheyenne, justice had finally arrived. Ahead of her, a future she would build with her own hands, and Elowen, her daughter, would grow up hearing both the thunder of drums and the hush of prairie wind, and know she was loved by all of it. Wade Hargreaves awaited the noose. His empire, built on lies, greed, and blood, had finally crumbled to dust. Now came the harder part, building something better. Clara Whitfield no longer rode like a woman running from death. She rode tall in the saddle, confident and calm. The frightened widow who once stumbled through the prairie with a fevered newborn in her arms was gone. She had stood before a federal court, faced the most powerful man in Copper Creek, and won justice. Not only for Samuel Whitfield, but for so many voices silenced by fear. But her greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in finding herself, her strength, her voice, her place, and her family, carved not by blood, but by loyalty and love. As they crested the rise and the Apache camp stretched out below, drums beating in welcome, children racing through spring grass, tears blurred her vision. Not sorrow. Joy. She was home. The Black Hills were alive again, painted in soft golds and greens by spring's gentle hand. 5 years had passed since Clara had first collapsed at the edge of this land, cradling baby Elowen, half dead and wholly alone. Now she stood at the same spot. But everything had changed. Below her lay more than a camp. It was a thriving settlement. The mine still ran, but not as the deep, scarring wound Hargreaves would have gouged. It was smaller, respectful, carefully managed by shared hands. It took what was needed and left the land whole. By the creek, a schoolhouse stood, its door wide open to all. Apache and white, mixed blood, adopted kin. Small homes dotted the hills, some of stone and timber, others of hide and lodgepole. All stood side by side, not conquered, united. "Mama, look." Elawan darted up the slope, her raven black hair catching the light, waving a carved wooden horse high above her head. Kyle's craftsmanship. At 5, Clara thought, watching her. She speaks Lakota as easily as English. Belongs in both worlds like she was born to walk their border. "Uncle Cale says I can ride a real horse soon." Clara chuckled, smoothing her daughter's wild hair. "When you're a bit taller, little one." Elawan grinned and sprinted off to join her friends by the water, Apache, white, and everything between. No judgment, no lines. "She's growing strong," said a warm voice behind her. Naya stood beside Clara, the years softening none of her spirit. Their bond had deepened into sisterhood, the kind earned through storms, fire, and shared hope. Clara smiled. "Like her mother?" she asked, teasing. Naya shook her head. "No, like herself. But yes, like her mother too. You found your strength, always had it. Just had to remember." Clara turned toward the horizon. "Kyle returns today." "From the federal talks?" Naya nodded. 3 weeks gone. Clara said nothing, but her heartbeat quickened. She missed him, more than she'd let herself admit. And then, the sound of hooves. A small party crested the distant ridge. Cale, riding tall, flanked by Marshal Owen Pike, and 2 smaller shapes Clara hadn't seen in years. Her breath caught. Luke and May Whitfield, Samuel's children from his first marriage. They dismounted awkwardly. Luke, now almost 12, already carried the stance of a cautious young man. May, barely 10, ran to Clara without hesitation, arms flung wide. "Uncle Orrin said we could finally come see you," she cried. Clara wrapped her in trembling arms. "And you're taller than I remember." Luke stayed back a moment, studying the people, the camp, the faces. Then he asked bluntly, "You live with Indians?" Clara met his gaze, steady and calm. "I live with family. Some are Apache, some are white. What matters isn't blood. It's how we treat one another." Kyle dismounted. He gave her the same carefully measured nod he always used in public, but she saw the warmth in his eyes. "The commission approved," he said. 3 new partnerships, modeled after ours. One in Arizona, one near the Rio Grande, another in Colorado Territory. Marshal Pike added, "Plenty of folks still fight it, but the results speak louder than their prejudice. Shared ownership, living wages, schools, food on every table. It works." Kyle said simply. That night, the valley glowed with celebration fires. Clara watched Luke and May slowly open up, tasting fry bread for the first time, laughing as Apache children taught them circle games. Elowen, proud and glowing, appointed herself their guide. It was her world, and she wanted them to love it too. As the stars rose high and the drumming slowed, Clara and Cale slipped away for a quiet walk by the creek. The path was familiar. They had walked it many times. But tonight, it felt different, closer, stronger. The children seemed to be settling in, Kyle said quietly. "Yes," Clara replied, then paused. "I hope." She stopped, uncertain. But Kyle waited. And in that silence, everything unspoken passed between them. 5 years of shared labor, loss, courage, protection, friendship forged in blood and choice. Tomorrow, there would still be things to fix. But tonight, There was peace, and something deeper blooming between them, something neither of them dared name. But both had chosen, quietly, long ago. Clara paused. Her gaze drifted across the campfire light toward the children. "I hope they stay," she whispered. Samuel would have wanted his children together. Cale turned to her. "And their mother?" he asked gently. "What does she want?" She stopped walking. 5 years of steady friendship, of quiet partnership, of unspoken feelings left untouched out of respect. Tonight, all of that trembled at the edge of something more. Clara drew in a breath, her voice barely above the hush of wind through the tall grass. "Their mother," she said slowly, "is ready to stop pretending that friendship and respect are all she feels." Kyle faced her fully now, his features softened by moonlight. The silver scars across his cheek, once marks of war, now gleamed like proof of survival. "When you came," he said, voice low, steady, "you were Samuel's wife. To feel more would have dishonored him. Your grief was sacred. But now," she said, lifting her chin, her voice firm, "I'm not just the widow of Samuel Whitfield. I'm Clara, just Clara." She reached for his hand. "And I love you. Not because you saved me, but because of who you are. Because of who we became. Together." Kyle's hand rose to her face, rough and reverent. "I have loved you since the day you stood in that courthouse and told the world the truth. I've loved Alawan like my own child. But I stayed silent because your heart still carried sorrow. I'll always carry Samuel with me," Clara said, her voice catching. "He led me here, but my heart is yours now." Their kiss was slow, not rushed or stolen, but rooted. A promise. When they stepped back, Cale smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "In my people's ways, a man must prove himself worthy of a woman's kin," he said. "I suppose I should ask Naya for her blessing." Clara laughed, wiping tears from her cheek. "She's been yelling at me to marry you for 2 years. Why is woman my sister?" Kyle teased as they turned back toward camp, hand in hand. The fire still burned high. Drums still thumped. Laughter still filled the air. When they stepped back into the circle, Naya took one look and let out a triumphant whoop. Cheers followed. Apache women encircled Clara, some laughing, some already making plans. Men clapped Kyle's back, and someone passed him a flask. Alawan raced up. "Does this mean Uncle Cale is going to be really our uncle now?" Cale knelt before her, solemn. "If you'll have me. A man who marries a mother takes on every part of her, especially her children." Luke, quiet and watchful, finally stepped forward. "Our father wrote about you," he said slowly. "Said you were the most honorable man he ever knew, white or Indian." Kyle met the boy's gaze. "Your father saved my life. I've tried to live worthy of that gift." Luke nodded, serious as a grown man. "Then yes, you can marry Aunt Clara." They wed a month later. It was a wedding like no one had ever seen, Apache and settler, spirit and law. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, embroidered with beadwork sewn by Naya's hands. Cale stood tall in ceremonial regalia, his braids tied with silver and turquoise. Marshal Owen Pike officiated the legal vows, and the Apache spiritual elder, Nereth, blessed their union under the sacred sky. Alawan stood between them, her wooden horse clutched to her chest, grinning from ear to ear. Kyle adopted her formally, by tribal law and by federal recognition. Luke and May flanked them, nervous but proud. When the sun dipped behind the black hills, the valley lit with joy. Cowboys, warriors, homesteaders, hunters, schoolteachers, midwives, children running with no care for skin or bloodlines, just laughter and belonging. My mother used to say, Clara murmured, watching it all, that the Lord works in mysterious ways. Cale drew her close. And what do you believe now? She smiled. Now I understand. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your true place. Family isn't blood, it's choice, it's love. She paused, eyes glistening. A woman cast out for birthing a daughter might end up helping birth a new world instead. Just then, Elowen ran toward them, fists full of wildflowers. For you, Mama, and you, Papa. She said the word Papa so naturally, and Cale's face softened with joy that words couldn't hold. As night fell and music filled the air, fiddle and drum weaving together something ancient and new. Clara danced with her husband. Her children played nearby. The wooden horse had a companion now, a small carved doll, part of a whole family Kyle was shaping, one figure at a time. Tomorrow would bring challenges. There would always be those who called their peace an abomination. There would be threats, struggles, pushback. But tonight, beneath stars that knew no borders, no sides, no color, Clara Whitfield, now called Standing Fox, was simply a woman, surrounded by love. The woman who once staggered through prairie winds, abandoned, shamed, clutching a newborn, no longer existed. In her place stood Clara Whitfield, a mother, a survivor, a bridge between two worlds, stitched together not by blood, but by grit, love, and unshakable will. The fire popped gently as twilight settled over the valley. Families began turning in for the night, Apache elders whispering prayers, settler children chasing the last flickers of daylight. The wind smelled of pine smoke and fresh-cut timber from the homes they'd built together. Kyle sat near the flames, carving a small wooden figure. Steady hands shaping quiet devotion. Clara's voice floated softly in song, a lullaby in English and Lakota, cradling Elowen against her chest. Nearby, Luke Whitfield and May Whitfield dozed side by side, wrapped in woven blankets, their heads resting on each other like siblings who had finally found solid ground. It was a simple moment. But it was more than just peace. It was revolutionary. A white mother, an Apache husband, children of two bloods and one heart. A blended village thriving not in defiance, but in choice. A living answer to every old lie about division, purity, and power. This quiet night whispered a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. The future didn't need to repeat the failures of the past. And here, in this small corner of the West, under a sky older than hatred and larger than fear, Clara knew every bit of it had been worth it. The exile, the pain, the frostbitten trails, the courtroom stairs, the bullets, the scars. She had been cast out for birthing a daughter, and instead, she had birthed something greater than any man could imagine. Hope, the kind of hope that didn't need to shout. It simply lived, a fire kept alive by love, by Elowen's laughter, by Cale's steady silence, by the harmony of drums and fiddles in the same night air. The West was changing, not through war, not through conquest, but through the quiet revolution of families like theirs, one choice, one voice, one vow at a time. And theirs? Theirs would be the torch that lit the trail forward. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment. And thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.